From the entire team of Entrepreneurship Cell, Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management, we would like to invite Mrs. Tarini Gupta, who is a co-founder of Dalal Street AI, which is building a product in the AI space for the financial services. Welcome, Tarini ma'am.
Thank you, Ashish.
So ma'am, starting with it, how did a student from Warwick University came back to Bangalore and started a product in a financial services space? So how was the journey with that?
Yeah, sure. So that's actually a very long story, but I'll try and summarize it for you. I was totally born and brought up in New Delhi. I did my schooling here and I just went abroad to study for my undergraduate degree. So I went and I did a BSc in business management. And that's where I kind of started developing some interest in the financial sphere. I did a few research products to understand trading and investments. I realized through my research that very few people in India actually trade. It's just 1.8%, and people don't trade for very basic reasons. So I was kind of motivated to develop something that would help the youngsters start trading and make their trading journey easier. But to do that, one has to integrate some sort of technology. And my background is actually not a technology background. Mine is a business. And that's when I came across my co-founder, Sri Vishnu. So he is actually based in Bangalore and I'm based in New Delhi. We met online and now for it's almost going to be a year that we've been working together. He has previous to when I met him, he had already been working on a sentimental analyzer. So it was great because he brought in the skill sets that I didn't have, and I brought in the skill sets that he might not have had. So that is how I came back to India and started working on this product.
So ma'am, how difficult was it that you two co-founders were from a very different backgrounds and came together? So was it difficult, or how was the journey with that?
Well, Ashish, actually, so we had no idea who each other were. It's been almost a year that we've been working together, but due to the COVID pandemic, imagine we've never met. But we are in touch more than we are with even some of our closest friends and our family members because we're working so much together. We have a team now of over 30 interns who are from across the globe. So we're very, very in contact all the time. But you can imagine that we still have not actually physically met. Our entire company started and has been functioning on a virtual level. So I think what was tough was to start trusting and, taking risks in terms of firstly, trusting a totally unknown person for him and for me both, then trusting in our skills. But what kind of enabled us was that we were always very honest. So, Ashish, I remember that it had been a few weeks that, Sri Vishnu and I had come into contact online. We had a few conversations and I just told him one thing. I was like, Vishnu, this is not my domain. This is not my skill set. We hardly know each other. But the fact is that there will always be certain things that you will have to hold my hand through and guide me through because this is not what my domain or knowledge base is in. And since then, he has always been very honest with me about what he can give, what he can't give, what he can add value to. And the same way I have been honest. And only because of this honesty have we had a very smooth relationship professionally, and also we've had a very smooth pavement for our entire business. So I think the main thing that got us here is honesty, but the biggest difficulty was actually taking these risks so blindly because almost everything was unknown to both of us.
That's amazing. That's the trust that you build among each other. So starting with talking about the elephant in the room, that AI that we have seen in the sci-fi films, that AI is doomed and the AI would kill us in the future. So how would you define AI?
So I would say that in a layman's term, artificial intelligence is basically trying to replicate a human's intelligence, but the human intelligence that even human beings have not realized. So if you look at a lot of researches and studies, and in fact there are lots of movies also that talk about this, that the intelligence that you and I and most human beings actually utilize is actually 1% or even less than what the actual human intelligence really is. So artificial intelligence is trying to tap into those aspects that even a human intelligence is not able to do. But at the end of the day, it's not always a negative thing as people do kind of think of it as. It's trying to make the life of humans better. And if you look at it, it's also a product of evolution, and one has to acknowledge and accept that there is something known as artificial intelligence. The ones who acknowledge it, who accept it, and who adopt it, they kind of survive this whole wave of technology and the whole wave, because it's not the job of artificial intelligence to actually replace human beings, but it's to use the human intelligence in ways that they should actually use it. So instead of doing those menial tasks or doing those jobs, which repetitive jobs, which a human brain shouldn't have to waste their time and effort in, artificial intelligence will come in to do that more efficiently, and that will allow human beings to actually use the intelligence that they have, but they have not tapped as yet. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Sure, yeah.
I was basically just trying to summarize and say that, it is a big elephant in the room. And there are lots of definitions. If you ask a technical guy, someone who's a very technology driven, artificial intelligence driven person, their definition to AI will be totally different. But for me, AI is a support to the human intelligence. It's a support to the human race, so that as humans, we can actually be using our intelligence more creatively, more uniquely, and more efficiently. And the tasks that we are wasting our time on today, and in this generation, there are a lot of people who are doing repetitive tasks that a machine can be doing, and instead we could be focusing our efforts on things that we actually should be. So for me, artificial intelligence is more a support system to human intelligence.
So would it take jobs out of people in the next decade or so?
So that's exactly where what I meant to say when I said survival of the fittest is, if you acknowledge it, that okay, there is something known as artificial intelligence. If you accept it, that these are the things that AI can be doing, and if you realize that okay, if the menial tasks that I was probably going to do as in a job are things that I don't have to waste my time on, then you start thinking about what are the things that you should actually be focusing on. So if one doesn't acknowledge it, then yes, it can take over jobs. But if one acknowledges it and realizes what are the things that artificial intelligence can't do that a human brain can do, that will be of benefit to them in terms of jobs not going for them, in terms of them actually using their full potential.
That's amazing, ma'am. But we all are connected with money. So will tomorrow in the future AI would run economies as such, or businesses?
So even AI, when you talk about AI, what we know as AI is again 1% of what AI actually is. And as much as we say that AI is going to take over the world, AI is coming in a big way, there's still a very big gap between how much AI is going to penetrate. So for example, in India, in the stock markets, there are lots of rules about how you can use artificial intelligence for stock market trading, for stock market advisory, things like that. So I don't think that AI is going to take over the way, how economies are affected, or the way how governments are affected at this current moment. But yes, people and governments will start using it as a means of support. So essentially, just to make it a little bit clearer for you, when I say that, I'll just take the example of Dalal Street itself. So what is Dalal Street? We're not trying to replace how things are done. We're trying to support those people who don't want to waste their time, or who can't waste their time in actually doing all this analysis and financial analysis to trade. So we are as a means of support, we don't actually mean to replace. And similarly, governments will use artificial intelligence, economies will use artificial intelligence as a means of support, but definitely not at all as a means of replacing the humans and how humans kind of organize and take forward the economies.
Taking on a similar example, in 2010 on 26th March, a coder from sitting in his parents' house in London set a sell order at New York Stock Exchange of $1 billion, and to spoof the market, and before the order was could get settled, the order got cancelled, and that brought a lot of effect on the financial market, and Dow Jones got 1,000 points, and it was similar to a Great Depression. So how would you think that your company and the technology AI would make this better, or investment the space better?
So essentially, when someone does get into the field of trading or investments or stock markets, there are really three different forms of analysis. If you just break it down and you say that what are the main forms of analysis one has to do, there are essentially three. And they are fundamental, technical, and sentimental analysis. Now, what's unique about Dalal Street is that we incorporate sentimental analysis very heavily and very accurately into our AI and algorithm. And we do that because we personally believe that the sentiments within an economy, the way people are feeling, the way people, their perceptions are and how they react really impact prices in the short run as well as in the long run in a very big way. And something like sentimental analysis, I personally don't believe can be done with a human brain, because that means you have to go through hundreds and thousands of social media posts or hundreds and thousands of articles or opinions. And how can a human brain actually do it? And even if they can, why should they waste their time doing it when a machine can be doing it more productively, more efficiently, and probably more accurately? So that's where we kind of come in, where we make the trading journey, the trade calls a little bit more accurate than maybe an inexperienced person could be. And that's why we do cater to people between the age group of 18 to 30. And this is the kind of technology that we are using to make trading and investing a better option, and not just a better option for people, but an option that's open. So in India, as I did mention earlier, there are only 1.8% of the people who trade. And when we dug deeper to actually understand why don't people trade in India, 1.8% is a very small number. And out of 1.8, there must be most of the people are probably not trading on their own. They have fund managers, etc., who are trading for them. So actually the number comes to even half of that. And when you look at why this happens, it's for very simple reasons, which are they don't have the time, because either they're working, studying, or sometimes even doing both, or they don't have the experience or the knowledge to do these forms of analysis. And end of the day, trading is like almost a full-time job. So this is the kind of way that technology can actually support people and can make their trading journeys accessible to them, but also maybe even more efficient.
So ma'am, what is government's take on this space, and what is the government, are there any regulations in the space, or how is that?
Yes, so there are actually a lot of regulations in this space, especially when it comes to algo trading. So algorithm trading is when the algorithm does the entire trading for you. So you put in some money and you trust the algorithm to make the calls and do the trades for you. So there's a lot of actually regulation, and we are hence not an algo trading platform, but we are rather an algo advisory, where we advise you, but at the end of the day you're the one as a human being to make the call whether you actually want to put your money in a certain stock or you want to sell that stock, etc., things like that. But yes, every economy has its own set of rules and regulations for AI, especially in the stock markets. But as you might be seeing, with this entire trend of Startup India and with the government really pushing startups to develop, there's a big emphasis on AI. And just a few weeks ago, Narendra Modi and the whole Startup India team actually had an initiative where they had talks about AI, how AI can be used. So they are actually really trying to push up AI, because even the government is now realizing its power. And so at one point, I would say the governments were a bit hesitant that AI is going to take over jobs, just like people like you and I are actually quite hesitant about it. But now they are realizing. So if you do a simple Google search, there are various initiatives to do with AI in specific and how we can incorporate it better in our country through startups.
So ma'am, in the financial sector space, it's all about the trust. So how difficult it is to build the trust with the consumers?
So essentially, the way you can actually build trust in any market, with any product, is to first prove yourself. And the best way to do that is to either do a free trial or give people the opportunity to see yourself and your calls that your algorithm is making. So our company is currently at the beta 2.0 testing phase, and we give access to a certain number of people versus the amount of people that actually apply to the beta. We give a very small percentage of those people access so that we are in touch with them on a daily basis. Now these people will use your products, they'll see what your calls are making, they'll see whether it's been profitable to them, and that is the best way to build any sort of trust. Those people who are happy with their trade calls will go and spread positive word of mouth, and that's how you slowly build trust. And honestly, that's the most organic way to build trust.
And ma'am, the financial markets in India is now at the current highs, and so it is the right time for the investors to start investing.
Well, there's never a right or a wrong time. It depends on what are the trade decisions you're making, which are the companies, the stocks you are investing or trading at the moment. It depends on the climate, economic climate. Things change on a minute to 2 minute basis. So I would say that one should start trading or investing sooner rather than later, but always start with a very small amount of money so that there's not much of a loss for you if you're just starting out. But definitely it's kind of an industry that can have a lot of profits and a lot of gains. Whether you're trading or you're investing, you can actually make a lot of side income or another flow of money that's coming to you to help you become financially independent. So especially right now, I think there was a big surge in the number of people who were investing and trading and entering the stock markets purely due to COVID. When the lockdown actually hit, people were losing jobs, so they were realizing they need another flow of income. People had idle time because everything was work from home, so they wanted to find another source of having an income. And essentially what really is happening, Ashish, is that people are realizing that this thought process of having just one flow of income, it's not sustainable anymore with the lifestyles we lead, with the lifestyles we want to lead in the future. And so whether people are doing full-time jobs, you'll always see a big portion wanting to invest, wanting to trade in something or the other, whether it's the stock markets or it's gold or it's anything for that matter, or it's properties. So slowly people are actually coming to realize that it's not sustainable to have just one flow of income. And that's why there's been this big surge of people who are entering the stock markets recently.
And similar to a stock market, according to a research that has just been done, that in the past 1 year, the best return on investment has been on the Bitcoin, which is above 160%, and its expected value is above ₹1 crore by 2030. So do you think that the cryptocurrencies would become like the financial markets, and are you building in the same way?
I think cryptocurrency is still a very uncharted domain, especially in India, but across the world there's a very small percentage of people that have even adequate knowledge about it. So I don't think that in the next few years cryptocurrency is going to become a very hot investing option in terms of number of people that actually invest. But yes, people are getting curious, people want to read more, people want to learn more, but still till now there are very few people who have proper understanding in it. And if you don't have proper understanding in something, it's very hard for people to actually start putting their money into something they don't have much understanding in. So that means that the first step is for knowledge, awareness about cryptocurrencies, bitcoins. Then the next step is to actually build your knowledge base enough to trust to put your own money in it. So I think there's still a long road right now for people who are actually going to be using it as another investing opportunity.
That's great about the view of the cryptocurrency in the world. So ma'am, what is the most important quality of a successful entrepreneur?
Well, now I can only talk from my experience, Ashish, but I think there are few which people hear all the time, but I don't think people actually understand the true meaning of it. So the first one is risk taking. The whole concept of risk taking, since I was in school, everyone used to say, oh, you have to be a risk taker, you have to be a risk taker. But what does it actually take to be a risk taker? It takes a lot of risk, it takes a lot of guts, and it takes a lot of mistakes as well. So as an entrepreneur, you have to take a lot of risks. I'll take my example. Now, I'm somebody who doesn't have the technology background. I could have looked around my circle, whether it was school or whether it to university and found someone who had about average, knowledge in that field or interest in the kind of thing that I wanted to build. But that would have been an easy option for me and probably maybe not have been the most efficient option for me. But I took the risk of finding someone who I had no idea, of, and he had no idea of me. And because we took the risk and we took that plunge, we kind of saw so many good returns, and our differences actually brought in so much more uniqueness to the entire product, to the entire way our company is actually run. So I think one quality or one ability that an entrepreneur must have is the ability to take risks, and to not always be bogged down by the scare of failing. So that's another thing, people depict failure as something that's wrong. But failure is actually part of the entire process, and almost nothing can be accomplished without having some downfalls. But really, it's about how you pick yourself from there and what you learn from that. Another one is self-motivation. As an entrepreneur, the main thing is you have to keep yourself motivated, and there's no one there to motivate you except for yourself. Sometimes people are lucky. I was lucky to have a co-founder who also helped motivate me. But a lot of times you have to be so self-motivated, because especially as an early stage startup, when you have to create everything and there's already not something that's created, you have to keep telling yourself that, okay, today wasn't a great day. Okay, we didn't achieve much in this month, but we have to keep going, so one big thing for entrepreneurs is self-motivation. And of course, the third thing that I would say is passion and dedication. So I always say that, whether you have the technical skills is secondary, but if you're not passionate about the product, your secondary skills will actually not help. Your technical skills will actually not help as much. And if you're passionate, you will slowly work towards developing the skills that you don't have, simply because you believe in that product so much, you believe in that business so much that you want to keep yourself associated with it. So I'll give you an example. I'm from a total business finance sort of background. But I really enjoyed marketing, but I actually never invested my efforts into learning any software. Now, as an early stage startup, you try to reduce your cost in every way possible. So, for the longest time, I was actually creating all the graphics and I was responsible for doing the marketing and things like that. And that's when I actually sat down, and within a week, because I was so passionate to keep adding value to this business, to this product, I learned Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, things like that, which I never thought I would actually learn. So what I mean to say is, if you're passionate, if you're dedicated, you can always learn, you can always develop the skills that you don't have. So skills come secondary, passion and dedication comes first. So these are just a few kind of skill sets or qualities that I feel, based on my experiences, are really integral to an entrepreneur.
So ma'am, similar to this, what should be the mindset of a person who's wanted to starting entrepreneurship to find the passion or to find the idea he's thinking on?
So, usually someone, to find an idea or to actually start something up, there are a few ways people go about it. So either someone has a unique, brilliant idea that, they've kind of come up with, or someone realizes that, X, Y, and Z are my skills, marketing is my skills, or coding is my skills, or public relations is my skills, and based on their skills, they then develop a business plan. Or then you find a problem in the market that, okay, I as a consumer, I faced this problem, or I noticed that my friend faced this problem, or I did this research and I noticed that there is this problem. And then you build a business model that bridges that gap. So usually there are these 3-4 ways that people start or find their business idea.
That was amazing, Tarini ma'am. So it was great talking to you about the entrepreneurship and how you built Dalal Street, and with the person that you don't even have met in the past 1 year. So thanks for this, and here is a rapid fire for you, a quick rapid fire for you. Steve Jobs or Bill Gates?
Bill Gates.
Bootstrapping the business or venture capital?
Bootstrap.
Equity or Bitcoin?
Equity.
Bangalore or Mumbai?
Bangalore.
India or England?
India.
What is your idea of capitalism?
So wow, so capitalism is actually a very big field. Now that you ask me, actually there was one quote that I had read about capitalism, and I actually have it here. I'm just going to read it to you once. So the quote was that, according to this person who wrote this quote, capitalism says that teach a man to fish, but the fish he catches aren't his. They belong to the person paying him to fish. And if he's lucky, he might get paid enough to buy a few fish for himself. So what this kind of tells us is that it depends. Now, not everyone can be the person who tells the people to fish. Not everyone has those abilities. So if you take, I'm sure they're talking about a business owner here who is telling his employees to go and do a certain job. Now, not everyone has the capabilities of being a business owner, and not everyone has the talent or the qualities or the skills to go and actually catch the fish. So I think capitalism, socialism, communism, all of these ones are very subjective to what is your background, what is your situation, what is your skills. And that's why everyone has a very different opinion on it. I personally don't have much of an opinion on it, but I do realize that as capitalism has some pros, it also has a lot of cons. And I think for me, the biggest con is that capitalism can bring about a very big inequality of income distribution. And if there is hardcore capitalism, it can definitely do that. But at the end of the day, one has to recognize that everything has its weaknesses, everything has its drawbacks, and it's subjective to each person's situations, to each person's where they are at life at the current moment. So for a business owner, it might just be the best thing, but for someone who's working under him, it might not be the best thing. So that's just my take on it. I don't have much of a personal take on it.
Ma'am, a book that you would recommend to a 20-year-old?
Wow, so I actually really love books. I think there was one book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I had read when I was much younger. I was 14, 15, 16 when I had read it. And I think if you read it with the mindset that it's not just about creating wealth, but more about deciding what you want in life based on that book, it helps a lot. So if you don't mind, I'll just give a bit of a context here. So I personally believe that the decisions you make today depicts where you are going to be in the next 3 to 5 years. So a book like Rich Dad Poor Dad would allow your mind to think and help you decide where you want to be in the future, and then you work towards getting there. Because if you don't have an end goal in mind, how do you actually get there? If you don't know that when I'm 40, this is the kind of lifestyle I want to be leading, then how do you actually reach that lifestyle? So that's why it's very important to first understand what are the possibilities, and then how to get there. Which quadrant do you have to be in to get there? And then figure out, how do I get to the quadrant? Because Rich Dad and Poor Dad talks about 4 quadrants. So it's very important to actually read that book for youngsters who are just starting off their journeys or deciding what is the career path they want to take.
That's great, ma'am. And a web series or a movie that you would recommend to people?
So I personally watch web series as a way of distraction, as a way of relaxing and chilling. So the ones that I would recommend are really not something that you can get a lot of learning per se or something that's inspirational. But the one I really enjoy watching, history and heritage ones, and the ones I'm thoroughly enjoying these days is The Crown. So that's the one I would recommend.
One skill every entrepreneur should have?
Communication. Because at the end of the day, you have to communicate with everyone. As a stakeholder, you communicate with all your stakeholders. As an entrepreneur, you have to get away with getting things done at low costs because you're not funded at the moment, or you would rather plug in your funds elsewhere. So things like collaborations come into play, which requires communication. So whether it's working with your team, building your team, working with your co-founder, getting investors, the main thing is communication. So
thank you, ma'am, for the rapid fire and where we end. So it was great talking to you on this, and it would be great if we could talk in person after the COVID gets over in college. So thank you, ma'am, for this session.
Definitely. And thank you so much for having me with you guys. I'm looking forward that once COVID settles down, and I hope it's soon that we all get to meet. And I'd love to come to your campus as well.